All right, everybody, thank you for joining us today. My name is Ramya. I'm the Citizen Science Coordinator for the Key Biscayne Community Foundation. Today we have with us Briana Gibbs, who actually works with me, and she is she's the I'm gonna mess this up. It's the
It's at the beginning of my lecture.
she's the Key Biscayne outreach consultant, and something else that I'm leaving out of that. But she works with us at the foundation, and she does a lot of work. Any of you from the Key Biscayne who have gotten COVID tested, she's the scheduler for that. And then she also helps with a lot of the citizen science, the lectures and social media and everything else. And blog posts, that's a huge part of it. So we are happy to hear from her today and her research as a trash scientist. So with that, Bree, I will hand it off to you.
All right. Thank you, Ramya, for that introduction. Gonna get on the right tab. So as Ramya said, my name is Briana Gibbs, and I am Key Biscayne Citizen Scientist Project Communications and Outreach Consultant. And today I'm here to talk to you about how combating ocean plastic starts at home, tips and tricks from your local trash scientist. And I'm gonna address it before I move on. It is light behind me because I am local only in name right now. I'm working remotely from my home in California. So it's a little crazy, but I think that that's, pretty par for the times right now. So as I said, hi, I'm Bree, a trash scientist. I adopted this name during my master's research at the University of Miami Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Science, where I spent my time posing with trash. I mean, studying trash. And that's not what I was paying money to learn how to do science for. I was actually spending my time learning about the fish that associate with plastic, trash, and other things in the open ocean. But to dive into that a little bit more, my research was with international nonprofit, the Ocean Cleanup, where I was studying the biological impact of their plastic removal system, which was installed in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in 2018. The system is, you can see a photo of it right here, an enormous trash removal system. This was the first prototype, and I was helping to see what was happening under the surface with the fish that were living out in that ecosystem. We'll come back to the garbage patch later on in the lecture, and you'll learn a little bit more about why I think that ecosystem and that region is so interesting. In addition to that, my research was about evaluating where the largest sources of plastic entering the Great Pacific Garbage Patch were and where they were coming from. And it's where I picked up the nickname marine debris. All of this stems back to a 7-week research cruise that I spent out in the middle of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, sailing from San Francisco to Honolulu, Hawaii, spending a couple weeks in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, learning a lot about what it is that happens out there and how we've created this enormous ecosystem that's just flooded with plastic. So that's enough about me. I want to know what you know about ocean plastic and specifically marine pollution. So we're going to use our computers, hopefully, and interact with this Zoom lecture. So for my Key residents and anyone else who's tuning in from wherever else in the country, I'd like you to use the Zoom reactions to raise your hand, which is to give me a thumbs up if you go to the beach often, or if you consider yourself, like a beach goer. The way that you can do this is to go to the bottom of your screen at the black bar and choose the thumbs up reaction. And I can see that we've got a couple thumbs up, a couple people that consider themselves beachgoers. I love the beach personally, and I love the beaches of Key Biscayne especially. Definitely half of you, I imagine that's why you came to a lecture about marine debris and what you can do to help it. So we are gonna move forward and ask, what kinds of trash have you seen on the beach? I know that you've seen it. Everybody has, unfortunately, at this point in time. And so what kinds have you seen? And I want you to enter that into the chat, if you would, to everyone, so that we can all kind of see what people have. Water bottles, plastic bags, golf balls. I know that that's unique to California. I haven't seen many of those in South Florida. Balloon scraps, balloons, bottle caps, cigarette butts. Wow, all kinds of stuff that we're seeing. Okay, cans. Yeah, so it's not all plastic. That's a very good point. Yeah, lots of really, really good stuff. Well, lots of good stuff in saying that you guys are seeing stuff at the beach, not necessarily good stuff for our oceans, but we see a lot of different types of trash on our beaches. And we're gonna go ahead and move onwards. So given that, I want you guys to pick what kinds of trash do you think are the most common on our beaches? So pick one or two of these, and the way we're going to do that is annotate as a function in Zoom. So you can go to your view options in your, again, black bar on your screen and go down to the annotate button and select a stamp to choose one of the images here. So I see.
So view options, just so if you guys are looking for it, it's at the top of the screen where it says you are viewing Bree Gibbs' screen. There's view options up at the top. If you, again, like she said at the beginning, if you're on a iPad or tablet or a phone, you may not have that option. So it's usually the people that are on laptops. View options at the top of the screen and go down to annotate.
All righty, I'll give it another couple minutes. We got a lot of arrows. Again, pick one or two that you think are the most common. I know it's exciting to play with the annotate feature once you find it. But so what we're seeing, by and large, our choices for this group are miscellaneous plastic trash. We have a few for fishing gear and a whole lot of people who think that we have single-use containers as our big issue plastic trash. And for the most part, you guys are on the right track. According to the 2020 Ocean Conservancy International Coastal Cleanup Report, food wrappers, cigarette butts, plastic bottles, plastic bottle caps, and straws were the top 5 items collected across the globe in an international coastal cleanup this year. So people from dozens of countries around the world went to beaches and found trash. And these are the top 5 items. Plastic grocery bags, which we see here, got a couple of votes. Those were ranked number 7. And, you know, for those that selected fishing gear, those didn't even rank in the top 10. So, oh, sorry, and cigarette butts, I think I said we're at the top. Yeah, they're in the top 5. So yeah, we're on the right track. Ramya, if you could clear the annotations, thank you. So given all of this information, we're going to put on our science thinking caps for those of us that haven't been out to the middle of the Pacific and maybe the middle of the Atlantic. And so what kinds of trash do you think we find the most of in the open ocean? And this one, I want you to just pick one item that you think is the most prevalent in our open ocean ecosystems. Gonna let some trickle in. So we're a little more scattered. We think, you know, seem to think it's fishing gear, plastic use containers, miscellaneous trash, of course, gets a lot of votes. I'm gonna let a couple more people file in. All righty, so pretty much an even-ish spread across the last 2, fishing gear and miscellaneous plastic trash. For those that chose fishing gear, I assume you watched my master's thesis because I know there's a lot of you in here for my defense, but you know, we're on the right track. We see it's probably not the cigarette butts, probably not those straws. And so let's dive in and see what actually is happening in our open ocean ecosystems. So Ramya, if you could, thank you. So first, we have to take a step back and say, why does trash accumulate in the open ocean? And what happens is there's a lot of forces at play when we talk about, you know, offshore ecosystems. But what really brings debris and also, you know, natural litter and tree trunks and all kinds of exciting, strange things that you wouldn't expect to see in the middle of the ocean to the middle of the ocean are our currents. And these are surface currents that are driven in part by wind action and in part by the rotation of the earth. So there's a lot of different forces at play that create these really nice gyres that are created in our oceans. And so you can see we have a few different gyres. I'm going to go ahead and turn off screen annotation. It's a little exciting as a tool, but it's not the time. And so we have these 5 oceanic gyres that accumulate all kinds of things, plankton, animals, all kinds of really exciting stuff, but it also accumulates trash. And so this diagram from 5 gyres is one of my favorites to use because it shows that we have 5 garbage patches, which is what scientists and conservationists term these gyres that also accumulate literal tons of plastic and other types of trash. In the oceans, there's an estimate that there's over 250,000 tons of plastic afloat. And the largest of these plastic accumulation zones or garbage patches is this Great Pacific Garbage Patch in the northern Pacific Ocean. So what do we find in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? We find fishing gear. A 2018 study conducted by the Ocean Cleanup found that 46%, or almost half of the plastic found in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, larger than 5 centimeters, is related to abandoned, lost, or otherwise discarded fishing gear. And for reference, I had to go measure what 5 centimeters looked like. It's about the size of my thumb. So all the adults that are watching this, it's about thumb size. For the kids watching it, probably like an index finger. So all of the plastic bigger than about this is, or almost half of it, is related to fishing gear, which is crazy. You know, when I think about reducing my plastic impact, I know that I'm thinking like, oh, I got to bring my reusable lunch bag, you know, stop using that plastic straw, maybe get a metal boba straw to take to the mall with me. But that's kind of goes against what the research says, in that we have almost half of this as fishing gear. So I wanted to evaluate why this was. And so what this graphic shows is that we have global fishing effort in every ocean. You can see here is the total fishing effort. So we have all different types of fishing. We have trawling, we have long lining, we have purse seining. We'll talk about those in the next slide for those that aren't fisheries managers. And all of this means that we are fishing our oceans very efficiently, but also there's literal tons of fish that we're hauling out, and we have tons of gear that we are using and sometimes losing to our open ocean systems. And so what the gear that we're finding in these open ocean habitats actually matches the most popular types of fishing that are occurring in our global oceans, which makes sense intuitively. But for those that don't know what commercial fishing looks like, this is what purse seining looks like. It involves taking a lead boat, which I'm pointing at my screen, which you cannot see, but it takes a lead boat and they encircle a school of tuna usually, and they'll draw that bottom shut and haul the fish aboard. Sometimes you can lose the gear in gear malfunctions on the ship. Sometimes the lines break. And that's one way that plastic and netting can be introduced to our open ocean ecosystems. Additionally, we have trawling, which operates similarly and with a similar net structure to that purse seining, only instead of wrapping it around the school, they'll fish by dragging the net through the water, kind of like pulling a butterfly net through the air as a little kid. And so this is another common method of fishing that is found throughout world's oceans, but is very prevalent in the North Pacific, where my research was focused. So finally, we have commercial long lining, which is exactly what it sounds like. You put out a really long line, you let some buoys hold it up towards the surface, and you have a whole bunch of hooks that dangle from beneath it, and it captures fish this way. Now, what makes these nets really effective and really strong in the modern age as compared with historical fishing effort is this incredible fibers that we've been able to make and design. Unfortunately, what makes those fibers so strong and unbreakable is plastic. And what's unique about this plastic is it also allows these fishing gears to float. As I say at the top, fishing gear mostly floats. After it's lost over the side of a ship, it can actually be continue to drift along ocean currents and find itself in new and exciting ecosystems that it wasn't ever meant to be in. Additionally, it only mostly floats because fouling creatures will actually live and stick themselves to the plastic and to the netting until the weight of the net actually pulls it down and it will sink, where it can actually pollute deep sea ecosystems in addition to affecting these upper surface level habitats. So lost gear can have a couple of really important negative impacts on our ecosystem. It can continue to fish after being lost or discarded. This is known as ghost fishing. And this is a common problem that we see when we look at fisheries in the large scale where, as you're trying to catch tuna, if a net that someone lost, months ago is still continuing to catch tuna that's not going to be consumed, there's less tuna available to be captured for commercial purposes. Additionally, it can threaten other marine life than the target fish species because of entanglement or ingestion. So this is a nice photo of a northern fur seal on the west coast of the country, entangled in some fishing gear. This is a common sight and a common problem for our seals and sea lions on the west coast, but it affects Florida species too. So it's not just the Pacific that this problem is prevalent in. We see we have garbage patches all over our world's oceans, but also we see, fishing gear all over South Florida. So who is being impacted by these abandoned, lost, or otherwise discarded fishing gear and or plastic found in the ocean? Well, hundreds of charismatic and lovable species that we, have in our waters. Obviously, this is a Florida manatee, dragging around with it some fishing gear, which can tire these animals out, and the entanglement can, alter their swimming ability or ability to breathe or consume food. Sea turtles are lovely summertime neighbors who come up to nest and hatch out of our beaches. This is a hatchling that unfortunately passed away at the Gumbo Limbo Nature Center up in Boca Raton. It was discovered that its stomach was full of microplastic debris, and you can see that in this photo. It's not just hatchlings that are affected by fishing gear entanglement. We have adult turtles that are also find themselves entangled in fishing gear and can drown or suffocate because of the entanglement with the gear. We also have our corals. We are home to the second largest barrier reef tract, right, Ramya? For the Florida Reef Tract. And fishing gear, if it's dragged or if it gets entangled on the corals, can actually smother our coral reefs or can break off chunks of them so that the colony is not as strong or as healthy or able to be resilient in the face of bleaching or other stressors. And of course, our lovely seabirds are affected by fishing gear because they're also eating fish. So there are and can be interactions between fishing gear and our seabirds. So I'm not here to say, let's boycott all fisheries and stop eating fish forever. I think that there's a lot that a consumer can do to make educated and exercise their power of, consumer power, voting power with your dollar, sorry, to, push the market in the direction of sustainability. And so what I would like to say to all of you is to shop smart, there are a number of resources that you can use in South Florida and throughout the United States that help you make decisions about what kinds of seafood that you want to consume. You can learn about where your fish comes from. The Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch Program is an incredible program based out of California, but it is a leader in the global sustainable seafood movement and has a website as well as a smartphone app that you can use and download and have in your pocket at the grocery store, at restaurants, and they tell you about the best and worst decisions you can make as far as health, as well as sustainability for the fish that you are consuming. Additionally, if you're in the grocery store at Publix or Winn-Dixie, you can look for this label on the food that you're consuming and see the Certified Sustainable Seafood label, which is from the Marine Stewardship Council. And the logo means that each fishery has been assessed on its specific impact to wild fish populations, as well as the ecosystems that those fish belong to. So you can help make sure that, you're not supporting a fishery that has, high rates of ecosystem destruction associated with it, or that's not overfishing the species that is the target for that, specific, can of tuna. Of course, we can reduce our plastic consumption use. That kind of goes without saying in plastic lectures, reduce, reuse, and recycle, but we can also clean our local beaches. And of course, I had to add in the bottom one of please report injured wildlife to FWC if you see animals entangled in fishing gear or any interacting with plastic. FWC is going to be a really great logo or a really great location to inform them of that, and they'll send you to the right dispatch to help either sea turtles or manatees, whoever your neighbor is that you're trying to help out, they'll send you to the right people. But, the plastic issue is one that is two-pronged, and that's why I included this last photo. You can reduce the plastic at the source, but you also have to clean it up once it's already out there. And so this really unique thing that I had no idea what it was, it's actually a place where you can store your fishing line that you don't want to, if you have extra or if you, it snags or breaks while you're fishing, you can stow that in these containers that are provided throughout South Florida. And that helps prevent fishing line, which can be immensely dangerous to our wildlife, from getting into the ecosystem in the first place. So we can reduce it at the start and we have to clean it up at the end. So I have a whole bunch of resources for my South Floridians watching that you can help at home. The Fill a Bag is another group under the Key Biscayne Community Foundation umbrella, and they allow Key Biscayne residents to turn their beach walks into beach cleanups. They have a whole bunch of stands that have buckets that you can just pick up trash as you're walking along the beach. And you know, everything that you pick up off the beach is something that an animal doesn't have to interact with. Free Plastic is yet another Key Biscayne Community Foundation umbrella group that harvests and converts beach plastic into art and furniture. Definitely recommend checking out their website. I think they do a lot of really cool stuff and create really cool art with plastic that wouldn't otherwise be able to be recycled. Send It for the Sea is a youth-led local group that is working to harness social media and education to teach local students and adults about the impacts of marine debris. And they also host beach cleanups. Last I checked, they'd harvested like 20,000 pounds of trash off of Miami, greater Miami area beaches, which is really exciting. And they're always hosting beach cleanups. So if that's something that speaks to you, definitely get involved with them. Debris Free Oceans, yet another group in South Miami. Oops, not yet. Debris Free Oceans is another great group that hosts beach cleanups in the Miami area as well. And finally, of course, we have Miami Waterkeeper, who is a local group that works to ensure swimmable, drinkable, fishable water for all in South Florida through community outreach and education, science and research, and legal advocacy. Miami Waterkeeper also has an amazing program called 1,000 Eyes on the Water, which is to try and help keep our ecosystems clean. And for those that remember the fish kill event that we had in Biscayne Bay a few months ago, I think it was some Miami Waterkeeper 1,000 Eyes on the Water observers that helped observe and also report this fish kill event. So there's a lot of really great organizations to get involved with. If you don't know where to start, definitely reach out to us at the Citizen Scientist Project. We are here to help and make, you know, science and conservation accessible. So without further ado, thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, please feel free to either blow up the chat, send an email to Ramya, or tweet us on Twitter at KBCF. So I'm gonna go ahead and open the chat on my computer, and Ramya, you can hop back on whenever you're ready. Alrighty. What is FWC? That is a really great question. I'm gonna run back to that slide so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. So FWC is the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. They are the authority on wildlife and fisheries management and environmental, like law enforcement for all of Florida. They manage a lot of different branches, and they do a lot of research in the state of Florida. Do you have anything else to contribute to that, Ramya?
Yeah, so
You
yeah,
answered that.
like Bree said, I can't unspotlight you for some reason, Bree. It won't let me. So everyone's gonna see you, and I'm just gonna talk in the background. But yeah, so like Bree said, they do a lot of the they do pretty much all of the conservation work for the state of Florida. And that includes in the water, they have officers that will go out in the water to help with, you know, if somebody reports a manatee tangled in fishing gear like Bree showed, they'll be the ones to go out and help untangle it. If necessary, they will catch it and bring it into a rehabilitation center and then release it later when it's healthy again. They do the same thing with sea turtles, gopher tortoises, basically any animal that is a native to Florida. They are responsible for their well-being as much as possible. They also issue fines for people that destroy habitat without a like permit to make changes to that environment, or people that intentionally you know, hurt wildlife in some way. Some of you may remember that the group of guys that, I don't want to really get into it, but they dragged a shark behind their boat and, you know, killed it basically. And they ended up getting into quite a lot of trouble for that. And it was the FWC that did the initial investigation on that. So they're responsible for law enforcement and for conservation of the wildlife and ecosystems of Florida, basically. And Bree, I'll read the questions that are being asked. There's quite a few of them in the
There's
chat.
a lot. Yeah, thank you.
And so far I haven't gotten anything through email, so I'll check the Twitter also. But
The Twitter's not having anything.
yeah. So do you have any recommendations for ways to help out in California?
Yeah, there's a ton of places, organizations that do stuff. I believe that was from MK, who I believe is based in the Bay Area. I'm less familiar with Bay Area stuff than Southern California, but there are tons of organizations in the Los Angeles area. Monterey Bay Aquarium is a great resource for information. If you're interested in fisheries side of stuff, again, their Seafood Watch program, their website is beautiful. All their information is amazing. They're incredible. And they've been at the forefront of this movement for a long time, which is sort of NorCal-ish. The Five Gyres Institute is a research institute based in the Los Angeles area, focusing on the five gyres of garbage patches. I'm gonna text you about it because I'll find you ones that are specific to your area and more specific to your interests.
Oh, sorry,
So
I
that's
did
fine.
it by accident.
We can go back to the last slide. That way people can continue to send stuff. Although having the chat is really nice. So there's a ton of organizations in California. I will look that up and find it for you. Any other questions?
Okay. So what is your prediction on climate change and Key Biscayne? When is the island going to be underwater? Oh, that's a fun question.
That's a big question. So I am not a climate scientist. I am a fisheries biologist, which means I largely spent most of my time thinking about the fish side of a lot of these problems and kind of making it fit my love of conservation. And so learning about this plastic stuff on the side and also as part of my research. Climate change is going to affect South Florida. We are considered the ground zero of climate change because we are going to be affected by sea level rise and already are affected by sea level rise. If you're a Key resident, you're familiar with, king tides flooding our streets and parking lots sometimes, as well as the storm surge associated with hurricanes. So it's not a matter of like when we're going to be affected by climate change, it's really how much. That said, we are, we take coastal resiliency very seriously in this community and are working to make our city, a safe place to live in the face of the threat that climate change poses. Ramya, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah,
that was kind of a bigger CST
it is actually
question.
A really difficult. It is actually a really difficult question to answer as far as when the island is going to be underwater, because the village is doing a lot of mitigation work to prevent that from happening. So, I mean, obviously, there's only so much you can do against nature, but we do have a good idea of what to expect. We are about 20 years ahead, or sorry, behind, I should say. We're about 20 years behind what's going on, or what has been going on Miami Beach. So we have an example to kind of look at to see what could happen here. And so that gives us a really good head start as far as preparing Key Biscayne so that we don't have some of the same problems that they have faced. That being said, how much can be done, how quickly, how much it costs, those are all considerations that are kind of difficult to predict. So definitely it's a problem that the island is facing currently, but it's very hard to know for sure how and when we're going. I mean, we are already feeling the effects of sea level rise in certain ways. But yeah, as far as how badly and when it's going to affect us, there's not a clear answer.
I saw another question that I really liked. So can I jump to that one?
Oh, sure, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm so sorry.
So it's fine. We still got half an hour, so you can just
we got
questions the rest of the time.
We related to the US versus foreign question with related to fishing. Fishing standards vary among countries. So how are countries already working together on global ocean cleanliness? What's awesome about this question is this is exactly what my research was kind of looking at. So the FAO, which is the, the United Nations Fish and Agriculture, Food and Agriculture Organization. I think about it as fish. I don't think it's fish. I think it's Food and Agricultural Organization. UNFAO collects data from every country that fishes in every ocean. They've divided the ocean into a series of blocks that make absolutely no ecological sense, but they have divided it up so that we can manage it and we can see what's going on in every, region of our oceans. And so we're already working together on ocean cleanliness through a couple of different international agreements. MARPOL, which is the Marine Pollution Prevention Agreement. I'm sorry, I really only know the acronyms, which is immensely unhelpful. But it's the International Agreement on essentially decreasing marine debris. It makes it illegal to dump your fishing gear overboard. So it's already illegal. It's just a matter of, creating gear that doesn't break. Accidents do happen at sea. Sometimes things get lost. We lose stuff to shipping all the time. So it's kind of a matter of just trying to work together and establish why it's important. In addition to, the loss of gear having negative ecological impacts, it's also a bad economic impact on the fisherman who lost his or her gear, because it is very expensive to have these huge nets made and manufactured. And in addition to losing the actual net itself, you've lost all of that catch that was, a huge section of your income. So there's a lot being done to work together. There's a lot of work between scientists and anglers, fishermen, commercial fishermen. All of these groups are all working together to try and help reduce the impact that ghost fishing is having on our ecosystems. So hopefully that answered your question. I just got really excited because I love the international collaboration, because it is something that's happening, even though we do see a lot of disagreement and discussion about what it is that, our standards versus their standards. There are international laws and agreements that we do all have to abide by. So that's kind of interesting and not something that I learned growing up.
Okay, so I apologize for my dog being ridiculous and barking in the background. I forgot I wasn't muted. Okay, so next question. Do you have any information on the effect of microplastics on our oceans and how to reduce these items from getting into ecosystems?
All right, so that's a big plastics question that I like to sidestep because it's a lot of physics and chemistry that I don't understand. But basically, microplastics are plastics generally considered smaller than 5 centimeters. And the reason that we end up with microplastics in this ecosystem is not because people are shredding their plastic and just dumping in the ocean like awful confetti. It's because plastic actually photodegrades, which means it degrades when the sunlight hits it and will actually break apart into smaller pieces, which tend to be these little toxic bundles that sometimes can be actually microscopic. And so what happens with microplastics in the ecosystem is they'll actually be introduced into the biosphere by the ingestion of these microplastics by usually low on the food chain organisms. And so as we see smaller organisms being eaten by bigger organisms in the food chain, we see this accumulation of these toxins that these plastics will carry with them. And so these can actually be immensely dangerous at high concentrations inside the body. And so we actually do see really negative impacts on fish and other organisms that have consumed other organisms that have eaten microplastics. How we prevent them from getting into the ecosystem in the first place is to go back however many years and just stop plastic from being produced, because they're everywhere now. We're drinking them, we're eating them, it's everywhere. How we prevent them in the future is to reduce our plastic consumption, again, of these single-use plastics, and also really focusing on, where plastic is. I didn't think before starting my master's that choosing what fish I would consume would affect my plastic, footprint on the planet, but it definitely does. And so looking out a little bit wider than we might expect helps us consume less plastic and maybe have less of that ecological effect on our amazing planet.
Yeah. So yeah, I think one of the only things we can do, aside from working out really expensive and difficult filtration systems, is just everybody being really, really careful about how their plastic trash is disposed of. Cleaning up, if you happen to go to the beach and you see trash, pick it up. It sucks that it's not yours and you shouldn't have to, but if it's there, at least try to do your part if you can. So yeah, but that, I agree with Bree, that's a really difficult question, because there's so much that's already there.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Is there any citizen science happening out in the gyres, or is it mostly organizations like Ocean Cleanup?
Another excellent question. There are so many different groups that are trying to research ocean plastic. There's like citizen scientist groups that you can get involved with. I think that there's a group called like adventure sailors or adventure scientists that they'll send you all the information you need and some of the materials to collect scientific data while you're under sail. Different small grassroots organizations exist to try and help with greater plastic pollution problems. But unfortunately, the big reality of open ocean research is that it is cost prohibitive to get out there. It's time prohibitive because it takes many, many days of sailing if you're on a sailing ship, which doesn't move very quickly, or it takes, thousands of dollars worth of, diesel and or gasoline to get you out there if you're not on a sailing vessel and are under power. So for research vessels like Rasmus's Walton Smith, it's $10,000 a day to operate a boat that big, let alone the staff and personnel that you need. So yes, there are citizen scientist groups. I think it's a unique opportunity that I was presented with to actually be able to go out there, just because it is such a astronomical expense to get to these remote regions of the planet. And although we're all interested in it, it is international waters. And so, there's a little bit less of a vested like governmental interest to push people out of our waters to go look at the research and do research on, waters that don't necessarily belong to us. So yes, they're out there. They're just a little bit few and far between. And usually there's something strange, like good and strange about all of them, I think. Like, with the adventure sailors, you have to own your own sailboat. Like, that's just a casual thing to do. But so there are ways to get involved and to learn about the ocean garbage patches. And there are definitely ways to get involved with helping the scenario out there and helping reduce what's there.
If I can just add to that,
Definitely.
there are also, sorry, my phone is being stupid. There, for people that have boats and spend time out on the water, there are apps that you can use. One in particular that I have on my phone, even though I actually very rarely get out on a boat. It's called Marine Debris Tracker. And when you're out on your boat and you see like large masses of fishing gear or just some kind of huge, some kind of trash out there, you can report it on this app and it keeps track of them. And then they are reported to authorities that will hopefully be able to get out there and remove them before they, drift away. This was actually a very recent issue in the Caribbean where there was an enormous kind of blob of fishing gear that was found by just a local fisherman. And it had tons and tons of dead animals stuck in it because it was drift nets basically. And he reported it, and he actually he and his the person working with him on his boat, like they helped to free one or two animals that were stuck that were still alive, and they reported it. And by the time the authorities got out there, it had already moved on. And so I don't know what happened. This was several months ago. I don't know if they found it or not, but they were searching for it. But it was an enormous like conglomerate of fishing gear and drift nets that was actually just in the Caribbean, which is, right here, right next door. So things like this app, like I said, is called Marine Debris Tracker. Very, simple, obvious name. But things like that as a citizen science project is something you can do if you are somebody that spends time on the water. Okay, so next question. Do you know how much of the fishing debris comes from US fishers versus foreign fishers and maybe less regulated fishing groups? That's a tough question.
That's a tough question, and my data is all very outdated because my master's research was looking at the data set between 1995 and 2015. So it is now 2020, so it's been a few years. Not off the top of my head. I can refer you to a really cool data set by the FAO that you could look at all the numbers of how many tons of fish are pulled out by each country that's enrolled in a part of the FAO. It's staggering. We are pulling hundreds of thousands of tons of fish out of the ocean every single year, which, you know, is mind-boggling to consider.
It is, and so this is one thing Bree and I share in common, is that we've both done fisheries management in graduate school, and it's one of those interesting things where people still seem to have the mindset that, like, there's no way to overfish the oceans. There's no way that we could deplete the oceans because they're so massive. And it's really not true, because over the years, like, aside from the fact that, you know, you have artisanal fisheries that, you know, have like their own, you know, small local impact, we have these massive commercial fisheries that over time get more and more and more efficient at fishing. And so, yeah, we're really good at fishing out the ocean. And that's just like when we're trying to. You know, a lot of countries outlaw drift nets and things like that, but there are some that still use them. And so you'll find, and drift nets are terrible because you just leave them literally drifting. That's why they're called drift nets. And then you come back and collect them, and anything can happen and they'll get lost, and then they just float around in the ocean, tangling up everything and killing it. And so it's a really, really difficult thing to, in that way, yes, the ocean is really, really big, and it's very hard to keep track of, you know, where things are and what's going on, but it's not as hard as you might think to overfish it.
Definitely. And I think that something that is a really sobering reminder of how much of an impact we as people have had on our oceans is I've had the pleasure of going offshore sailing a couple times. This offshore trip with the ocean cleanup, of course, we went to the garbage patch, so I was expecting to see plastic, but you really can't go very far without seeing an impact of people. Where, like, you know, backpacking in a national park, you know, you could walk off the trail and 5 minutes away, you'd have no idea that humanity had ever stepped foot there. Where, you know, in the open ocean, you really can't go more than a few hours without seeing a piece of plastic, like a floating, you know, a buoy from a fishing float, or, you know, I've seen all kinds of weird stuff like windowsill, like garden boxes. It's very sobering, and it's intense to realize that we've made such a big impact on our planet. Although I think it was today that article came out about how there's more man-made things on Earth, like in weight or something, than like natural. Did anyone else see that? Did you see that, Ramya?
No, I didn't see that, but
Oh
that
my
would
gosh.
surprise me, to be honest.
Yeah, we've made so much that we are like outpacing, I think it's like nature. It's crazy.
Natural resources.
Yeah. So, sorry, human stuff now outweighs all life on Earth, from Science, the magazine, the research journal, which is crazy. Like, Earth is so big, and we're out here just making all kinds of things. So just, it's important to realize that, like, you know, even though I as a consumer, you know, might not consume all that much plastic, like, we're contributing to an economy that, you know, relies on this production. And that we as humanity are huge and have a huge impact everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, shush. Sorry. Okay, so there's still a bunch of questions. I'm gonna stop like saying anything unless you want me to say something, just so we can get through them. Before we go on, we have somebody that asked if we have a number. She says, I've called other organizations for turtles in distress and birds too. I have a couple numbers and I will put them into the chat right now. One is Marine Life Rescue that actually my colleague Jane just emailed me conveniently. So thank you for that, Jane. And then I also have the FWC Wildlife Alert, where you can report any sick or injured wildlife. And I'll put those in the chat right now. So next question. Oh wait, that was the same question I was looking at. Sorry. Related to the US versus foreign question, fishing standards vary among countries. So how are countries already working together on global ocean?
We talked about that.
Okay, I'll skip that.
Yeah. Sorry, Tati.
No, it's fine. I was also just, oh, what did you do on the ocean cleanup?
I helped collect microplastic. We did a transect as we went out to the garbage patch, and we used what's known as a manta trawl. So kind of like a micro version of fishing for fish. We were fishing for plastic to try and see what the surface levels of microplastics were on the way to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And so we'd throw a really big manta ray-ish shaped contraption over the side with a little trawl net behind it with a really tiny mesh size. And we would collect microplastics and see what the concentrations looked like as we left shore and approached the garbage patch, just to see what's out there, because again, there are very few research cruises that actually do get to go all the way out there. So we're trying to take as many data points as possible. We also, what else did I do? I helped with the oceanography and ocean physics team look at, take measurements on what's happening in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, how the forces flow. Even though we know approximately why the plastic accumulates in that region, we wanted to see what the small scale physics looked like and where things would drift. Sometimes, you know, you could drop like 3 drifters in the same place and they might go 3 different directions, even though you dropped them like right next to each other. Open ocean's weird. So there was that. I was personally looking at the impact of that system that we saw right at the beginning. Using the buoys from that fantastic selfie. Let's see, get back to the beginning. That one, not that one, that one. So this big device was deployed in the open ocean for about 3 months. Just gonna take a 3-minute detour to my thesis. Fish follow floating objects, trust me on it. I wrote a lot of pages about it. You can read it if you'd like. And so when the ocean cleanup said they were going to deploy this big system in the open ocean, a whole bunch of fishery scientists were like, hey, this may have an impact on this, you know, group of fish that already feed and live out there. So my job was using acoustics and buoys that are essentially like little mini sonars to these little buoys right here, to look down into the water column all around this barrier and see what was going on. Did fish follow the barrier? How many? In a biomass sense, not like individual sense. Those echo sonders are very expensive. So that was my master's research. Unfortunately, the system did break after 3.5 months or 2.5 months. So my data sample was pretty small, but we did find that fish hung out there. So it was more of an observational study, but really exciting because I could take my data remotely. And so I was analyzing my data in California, in Miami. It was pretty cool. So that was most of what I did on that research cruise, in addition to looking for plastic and looking for rainbows, as you can see here. But yeah, it was a really cool opportunity and a really interesting research experience.
And just taking pictures of yourself, extremely excited.
So excited all the time. I love being on the water. So, a lot of really goofy selfies came out of that trip.
Okay, so besides keeping harmful things out of waterways and choosing careful fisheries, which is a great start, are there ways citizens can support healthy oceans or add good things to the system?
Yeah, donate to organizations that are doing good stuff. We can't really dump man-made things into the ocean to make it better, I don't think. But what we can do is research, better ways to clean it, better ways to keep it safe, better ways to prevent bad things from getting into the ocean. So, support organizations that are doing interesting things that, support your idea. Obviously, I'm a humongous fan of Free Plastic, not just because he's here, but because as soon as I started working at the nonprofit, Ramya told me about them and I was like, this is the coolest thing that I've ever heard of. All of the organizations that I listed at the end of this lecture are groups that are doing amazing, important work throughout South Florida. I could tell you a million groups that are doing a million amazing things, because my personal interest is in the ocean. But yeah, so support what you want. So I would say if you're interested in keeping the oceans clean, focus on ocean-based organizations. Additionally, support groups that are trying to prevent plastic from getting there in the first place. There's a lot of different eco apparel companies that actually use recycled water bottles. Some Rasmus grads are the Waterlust eco apparel company. I'm actually wearing one of their scrunchies right now. They make all of their clothing out of recycled plastic bottles, and they donate 10% of their proceeds to different marine life research groups all around the South Florida area. There are so many people that are trying to do so much good in this world. If you need a list, email me. I will send you a comprehensive list on everything that I can think of and what they do. But yeah, definitely, I would say speak with your dollar and volunteer your time. Beach cleanups are always valuable. I love jogging and cleaning up the beach. I usually don't leave the beach with less than an armful of trash that I've found. But yeah, just remember that you have, you know, the ability to exercise your power as a consumer, as a, you know, even if it's a few dollars, you know, I can attest to how much of a difference small donations make at a nonprofit. There's so much that you can do. Yeah, hope that answers that.
Bree, what was the name of the Erasmus grads that your scrunchie came from?
Waterlust. So it's like wanderlust, but waterlust.
They actually have a lot of really cool stuff. I've bought things from them. It's pretty amazing.
Love them.
In particular, their whale shark pants.
Yeah,
I love them.
They're fantastic.
Okay, so how much of a problem are those microbeads that we are hearing so much about being used as scrubbing agents in like toothpaste and face and body washes? Before you answer that, I do want to say that a lot of companies have stopped using them because they are such a problem and they don't dissolve, they don't go away, and then they just end up being fish food. But go ahead, Bree, you can answer that.
That's about it. It's microbeads are microplastics. They're already intended to be that small and they are made of plastic. So not great. I've tried to avoid them for like my face washes and things just because like personally the idea of rubbing microplastics into my skin makes me a little uncomfy. But I would say, you know, it is a microplastic and they are a little bit difficult to avoid once you start like looking for them. But as Ramya said, they have been kind of on the decline because they aren't great. So it's a microplastic by definition.
Yeah. No, they are really bad. I mean, so I mean that the picture that Bree showed earlier of the sorry, I said I was going to talk and I lied.
That's fine.
The baby turtle that had all that plastic in its stomach. I have lots of pictures of very similar things of hatchlings dying because their stomach is full of plastic, and it's just the difference. Like, you know, it's they can't tell the difference between what's plastic and what's food. And when you look at things like microbeads in particular, they're these little round things that resemble a lot of different organisms that live in the ocean that are small, tiny, round organisms. And so, you know, it's the same as like a turtle confusing a plastic bag for a jellyfish because they look very similar. When you look at it on a much smaller scale, a microbead looks like a coral egg or something like that, you know? So like you have these filter feeders and you have a lot of different animals that feed on these very, very small things that usually live in the ocean. And then they just end up filling their stomach with plastic that doesn't digest, and then they starve to death, literally. So we don't know, I don't think. I think you already said this, Bree. We don't know how much of a problem it is, but it's a problem for sure. The next thing is actually a comment, which is I completely agree with. I think we can also avoid cosmetics that are made with microplastics. In addition, fleece made with microplastics, which is true. Fleece is actually a huge problem in that it releases a lot of fibers that are essentially microplastics. The balls, quote, balls that take the plastics out of fleece in dryers, those the little balls of like fuzz that show up on your clothes, those are microplastics actually a lot of times. And yeah, it's a huge, those are a huge issue. Let's see, next question.
I think that might be
it.
If not.
Yeah, so Alex gave some information. The microbead-free plastic, Microbead-Free Waters Act of 2015, I can't read, banned microbeads in toothpaste, face soaps, and etc. I also did list phone numbers, the Marine Wildlife Alert and FWC Wildlife Alert. And then a couple of useful apps for citizen science work in conservation. Marine Debris Tracker, iNaturalist, I've got one. I also did list Bree's email address because she said to email her if you had questions. So I am totally putting you out there, Bree, for that.
All good.
And we are right at 8 o'clock, and I think we've answered all the questions. So if anybody has anything else that they want to ask, feel free to email Bree directly or email me, and we're happy to talk to you about it afterwards. Thank you all so much for coming. Next month will actually be, I can't show myself because for some reason I can't unspotlight you. It won't let me.
I can see if I can exit and we can maybe do it that way.
But next month will be me. I will be talking about my own research, which is similar but different from Bree's. It's also about pollution, but not large scale pollution like plastics and things like that. So we will, again, so next month we will be back to the regular schedule of the third Thursday every month. This month we moved it up a week because of Christmas and things like that. But yeah, so we hope to see you all there next month. And thank you again for coming. And like I said, if you have any questions or if you want to be added to our mailing list or anything like that, just shoot me an email and I will add you. And that's it.
Thank you all for coming. We have people from all four corners of the country tuned in here, which I think is really, really cool. I appreciate the support. And thank you, Key Biscayneers, for providing such a great backdrop for a great, cool topic. So have a great one, and we'll see you next month for Ramya's talk. It should be really exciting. If the Wi-Fi on the research vessel allows, I'll be there. If not, Ramya's going to give an amazing talk regardless. So
and I'll be, if Bree's not there, then I'm going to be fielding the questions by myself. So have some patience with me.
All right. Well, thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.